Hands-on, how to organize a messy project. It's not uncommon to have to work on a project that has no structure to it. It's a major pain because it makes everything 10 times harder. Any changes you want to make require a lot more effort. So in this video, I'll show you how I fix up a project. One of my students was kind enough to lend me one of his early PSD files. Let's not judge the design too hard since everybody has to start from somewhere. But before we do that though, I'd like to remind you this is an exercise. You have the messy project attached to the course. You also have the clean version I'm about to make. Please stop the course now and clean it up for yourself. See how long it takes you and then come back to the video. Then watch me do it. It's not a matter of competition, but you should aim for efficiency and speed. So one last chance. Stop the video here, perform the exercise by yourself, and then resume the video. Okay, that was it. Let's jump into the project. I selected this particular one because it's a prime example of what your layers panel looks like if you neglect it. As you can see, it's a complete mess. This complicates our lives immensely. Say I want to use this sub-hero section in another project of mine. How am I supposed to move it? As you can see, it is grouped, sort of, but it's pretty pointless. You should also note the file size, 83 megabytes. That's huge. But if we look in the Layers panel, we can see all sorts of big images that are left as smart objects. If we hit Ctrl-T, we can see this first image is at 29% of its size. This increases the PSD size, and it also consumes more computer resources. So we should optimize this aspect as well. But enough introductions, let's get to work. First, I'll hold Ctrl and I'll click once on this Group 14 folder. This will make all folders collapse. I'll do it again so all of them will expand. As you can see, our scroll is now much bigger. Next, I'll go to the top and I'll select the first layer. I'll hold down Shift while scrolling so I can reach the bottom faster. Still with the Shift key down, I'll select the last layer. So with this move, I've just selected all the layers in this project. Now hit this small arrow key next to any layer that has layer styles. This will make them collapse, thus giving us precious space in this panel. No need to hold Shift here. Great. Next, we'll rasterize all the stock images since it's highly unlikely we'll enlarge them. Remember, this is the final PSD, the one our client will receive. So go to the top of the Layers panel and press on Kind. Now click on the last icon and this will show us only our smart objects. Remember, if you don't know what a layer represents on the canvas, either move it, then press Ctrl-Z or Ctrl-click its thumbnail to make a selection. This way you won't accidentally rasterize a layer that should be kept as a smart object. We have several stock photo images in this project. Please don't use them in any way other than educational purposes. You may not use these in any commercial project. Select the first 5 with the help of Shift. Hold Ctrl and select Layer 2 and the last one. Right-click and choose Rasterize Layers. Now let's save this as a separate PSD so we won't overwrite our initial project. Save it with any name you want. If we now check its size, you'll see it's under 30 megabytes. That's a huge reduction in size, but the main point is it's easier to send over through email, and it also requires less computer resources to handle. Back to the project. Click on this small red button to disable the layer filtering. Now we'll zoom in and we'll start working our way down from the header all the way to the footer. The technique I'm going to rely on is Control-clicking on the canvas to identify my layers, grouping and renaming. Let's establish the header area. Layer 2 is our logo. Rename it and group it. Name that Header. Move the folder all the way to the top. Now select the main menu and all the layers around it. I like to zoom in and use Ctrl and Shift to select several layers. Remember to move them around to make sure you've selected them all. Now move them in the header folder. Select shape 11 and 7 and merge them since they're the same thing. No reason to have them as separate layers. Use Ctrl-E for that. Name it Active. We can close the folder and toggle its visibility. This will allow us to see what's missing from it. We need the white background and the top part. The first one is easy. Control-click and you'll see it's all the way at the bottom of our Layers panel. It's named Rectangle 11. Rename it to BG and move it up. If you release it in a folder, it will automatically be the last layer in that group. Now for the top part. Select the blue teal background and rename it. Then rasterize all the social media icons, but also their layer styles. Select the text on the left side. Looks like it's already grouped as Group 11. Rename the dotted lines as dots and rasterize their layer style. Now move this folder along social icons into Header. You can use Ctrl-Shift-square bracket to move it all the way to the top. Rename it Top. A nice shortcut that buys us some time. Remember to clean it as you see fit. Here's how it should look. Oh, I forgot to rename the cursor. Let's do that too. And this drop shadow really bothers me. We're not here to improve the design, but I'll get rid of this effect. Toggle the visibility of the header folder to make sure it's done. It seems we didn't need the BG layer after all, but again, we're not here to comment or improve the project. OK, moving down to the hero area. Control-click a few times to better understand each layer. We'll do it the following way. The main background will be BG and the image will be renamed into IMG. You should make a note of that code before you rename the layer because that contains the image ID from the stock photo website. The layer from the bottom will be called Glass Effect. Now select all 4 layers with the same Ctrl-Shift-Click technique and group it. Rename it to Hero Area. Then move it underneath our header folder. Toggle the visibility to make sure things are right. And as you can see, there is a blue horizontal line we missed. Zoom in and select it. Rename it 1pxHR line. Move it into our hero area, but it should be above all the other layers. Now we have 2 folders completed. This headline is a group for no reason at all. Right-click and ungroup it. Then move it under our hero area folder. Now for these 3 sections. Rename all the white rectangles to base. The orange ones should be called IMG holder. I like to copy that so I can easily paste it. The pictures will be called IMG. The dots are already called points. Now this is going to be tricky. Zoom in really close. Now we have to select as many layers as possible. The base, the description and title, the image, and that will show us the IMG holder layer in the Layers panel. We have to manually select it with the help of Control. Move it to make sure you're in good shape. Now group it and move it underneath the headline. Select the orange circle and zoom in really close to get the bulb icon. Group that too and move it into our previous folder. This is going to be called Icon, while the main folder is going to be 1. Now we have to look for those points. Hide the folder and we'll get them easily. Get the dots, the cursor and the bulb. Make sure you double check you got the icon and not the background. This may be a little tricky, but be patient. Use the same Control, Shift, square bracket to move them up. Clean it up a little. Make the 1 folder visible and drag these layers into it above the icon folder. Rename the icon to Inactive Bulb and mark it with red. This way we won't delete it by accident. Close the folder and check you got everything. Now I'll repeat the process for the other two. First the base, the description and the title. Then the image and subsequently the IMG holder. Group and rename to 2. Move it up and underneath folder 1. Group the icon and reposition it. Next, hide the entire thing to get the points. Move them above the icon folder and our second section is done. Let me do the same thing for the third one. Great, now group these 3 along with the headline and call the folder Sub-Hero. We should also include the pencil and the 2 lines into it. These are a pain to select from the canvas. Use the same shortcut until these 2 layers are above everything else. Rename this layer and drag them both into the Sub-Hero folder. Only a bit left to go. The background is messed up. I won't get into it though, I'll just rename it to Main BG. Now for the portfolio section. Let's rename the rectangles and the pictures. This bluish layer should be grouped along the cursor and icon into a folder named Hover. Now for the selections. It seems we already have a folder named Like that includes this entire area. Select it alongside the first base and IMG layers, group them and rename that to 1. Now let's get the holder folder along IMG, base and the other Like group. Put them all together and call that 2. Repeat the same steps for 3. This layer 15 seems to be empty. I've tried both techniques on it, but it doesn't have anything in it. Let's delete it along with its folder. Layer 14 seems to be an inspiration layer, so let's delete it. Next, get the background for this section. Move it up, but underneath the 3 folders. Then group it with the 2 text layers and rename it to Portfolio. Remember to open up your main folder and close anything that might be expanded. Finally, the footer. Select the main rectangle and call that main BG. Group it and call it footer. Then select the two horizontal lines and put them inside. Rename them, of course, top HR line and bottom HR line. For the social media icons, we have 3 steps. Rasterize all, rasterize layer styles, group, and rename. Okay, 4 steps. Put it in footer too. Do the same for the logo. Now each section needs its own folder. First, the About Us section. Then Contact Us. And Participations. Next is the newsletter. Here we need to rename this to Field and this to BTN. Now group them all. Hide the footer folder to see our progress. We only have our bottom section left. Select that rectangle and rename it BG. Group it along the 2 text layers and reposition it into our footer folder. Rename this to Scroll Up and put it above Newsletter. Close this main folder and move it underneath Portfolio. We can now select all of these trash layers and folders and delete them. I'll move them around first to make sure there's nothing important. One final check. And it's done. This is how I'd clean up a messy project. Of course, I'd move much faster if this wasn't recorded, but you get the techniques involved. Please compare the 2 projects and tell me what you think. I'd say the improvements are obvious and very useful. I can now easily extract any element with ease. Okay, we're finished with this section. Now it's time for you to practice.